Most people pray, but they don't really let go. They speak the words, they might even feel a surge of hope in the moment, but then the next hour or the next day, they're back in the same mental cycle, worrying, planning, controlling, and trying to force life into the exact shape they think it should take. And the problem with that is very simple. You cannot claim to trust something if you're unwilling to release your grip on it. Think about the paradox here. Prayer, at its essence, is an act of surrender. It's the recognition that there is a reality bigger than your immediate perception, a wisdom beyond your own, and a timing you cannot fully control. But if right after that prayer you pick everything back up and carry it on your own shoulders, it's not surrender, it's just ritual. You've performed the gesture without embracing the reality, and that creates frustration because you start to believe prayer doesn't work, when in truth, you never gave it the space to work. Now, here's the uncomfortable truth. Letting go is terrifying. We don't like uncertainty. We don't like the idea that life might not follow our exact blueprint. And somewhere deep inside, we think that if we don't control every detail, things will fall apart. But in reality, much of life is already outside of your control. You can influence outcomes through your actions, yes, but you cannot dictate the timing of opportunities, the actions of others, or the unfolding of events beyond your reach. When you truly trust your prayers, you accept that there's a point where your effort stops and something greater begins. And this isn't passivity, it's wisdom. It's knowing that over-control kills possibility. The more you try to force life into your version of how it should be, the more you shut out the ways it could be, often in ways far better than you imagined. Let me put it in psychological terms. The human mind craves certainty because it's safer for our survival. We evolved to anticipate danger, to prepare for outcomes, to stay alert to threats. That's great for keeping you alive in the wilderness. But in the modern world, it often becomes overthinking, anxiety, and an inability to rest. Surrender in prayer is like training your mind to tolerate uncertainty without falling apart. It's building the psychological resilience to say, I don't know how this will unfold. I know I'm not alone in this process. That's not weakness. That's strength. It's the strength to stand in the middle of uncertainty and not be consumed by it. And if we approach this philosophically, you could say that surrender is a recognition of the limits of the self. No matter how intelligent, disciplined, or capable you are not the author of every detail of reality. There are forces at work, call it God, destiny, natural law, or simply the complexity of the universe, that you cannot bend entirely to your will. To deny that is arrogance. To acknowledge it is humility, and humility is the soil where trust grows. Surrender is not simply doing nothing. That's the mistake many people make. They think trusting their prayers means they just sit back and wait. You work, you act, you prepare. You show up fully for your life. But you do so without the tight, choking need to control the outcome. You do the work as if it matters, because it does, but you release the obsession with results. This is one of the most psychologically liberating mindsets you can cultivate, to give your best without being enslaved to the outcome. And here's where it gets interesting. When you let go, you actually perform better. You're more creative, more adaptive, more open to unexpected opportunities. Why? Because your mind isn't clogged with anxiety about what must happen. You're able to see what could happen. The rigid plan in your head gives way to a living process, and in that space, life can surprise you. And often, the surprise is far greater than the thing you were clinging to. Now you might ask, how do you practically let go? Because it's easy to talk about in theory, but in the heat of life, it's hard. The answer is both simple and difficult. You make it a discipline, the same way you train your body at the gym. You train your mind in release. Every time the urge to over-control rises, you consciously place it down. You remind yourself, this is not mine to carry alone. You might have to do that 100 times a day at first. That's fine. Every time you release, Even for a few seconds, you're building the muscle of trust, and you will be tested. There will be moments when nothing seems to be moving, when silence is the only response to your prayer. Those are the most dangerous moments for your faith. That's when the temptation to take everything back into your own hands is strongest. But it's also the moment when real trust is forged, because trust is not built in the yes moments, it's built in the not yet moments. Letting go is a radical act because it's an act of faith in a world that constantly tells you to grip tighter, fight harder, control more. It's a countercultural move, and ironically, it's the people who master this who seem the most unshakable. They're not tossed around by every delay, rejection, or closed door. They understand that those moments are part of the answer. They're not failures of it. So if you pray, then trust. Don't sabotage your own words by dragging your burdens back into your hands as soon as you're done speaking them, live as if what you prayed for is already being worked out in ways you might not see yet. Your role is to keep showing up, keep doing what's in your power, and keep releasing what isn't. You can either live with clenched fists or open hands. Clenched fists might feel strong, but they can't receive anything new. Open hands are vulnerable, yes, but they are also ready. Ready to receive, ready to adapt, ready to be led towards something greater. So, ask yourself, are you gripping life so tightly that you're choking the very thing you've been praying for? Are you willing to loosen your hold, to let the process unfold, and to trust that the outcome will be what it's meant to be? Because here's the truth, when you finally learn to let go, you don't lose control. You gain peace. And in the quiet space that peace creates, the answers have room to arrive. A lot of people misunderstand prayer because they think it's a magic formula. Say the right words, in the right way, and somehow reality bends to your request. But prayer, when understood deeply, isn't about passively waiting for something to fall from the sky. It's about aligning yourself with the direction of what you're asking for. If you're praying for something, your life should be moving toward it. And if it isn't, you're not really praying, you're just wishing. This is where a lot of frustration comes from. Someone says they're praying for better health, but their daily choices are destructive. Someone says they're praying for financial stability, but they're not building skills, budgeting, or seeking opportunities. Someone says they're praying for a better relationship, but they're not cultivating the patience, empathy, communication needed to sustain one. You can't pray for rain and then curse the clouds because they block your sun. You have to prepare your soil for what you're asking to receive. This is the hard truth. Prayer without alignment is self-sabotage. If you're asking for peace but living in chaos, whether that's through your environment, your habits, or your relationships, then you're walking against the very thing you claim to want. Trusting your prayers means your behavior and your mindset shift to reflect the belief that what you're asking for is real and on its way. And that belief demands preparation. From a psychological perspective, this is about congruence. The human mind functions best when belief, intention, and action are aligned. When you say one thing but do another, you create internal dissonance, an inner tension that breeds frustration, doubt, and cynicism. You start to lose faith, not because prayer doesn't work, but because you're living in contradiction. And contradictions erode trust, especially trust in yourself. Philosophically, it's about integrity. Integrity means wholeness. When you live in integrity with your prayer, your life becomes a single, unified movement toward what you seek. You're no longer divided between what you hope for and what you're willing to do. This is why so many ancient spiritual traditions link prayer to discipline. They knew that asking without acting is empty, and acting without asking is blind. The two work together, each strengthening the other. Think about it this way: if you're praying for opportunity, you should be building readiness. If the very thing you're asking for arrived tomorrow, would you be able to hold it, manage it, grow it? People think they're waiting on God or fate or the universe. But often, the delay is because they're not ready for the thing they're asking for. You might be praying for a bigger platform. Without the discipline to handle the pressure, it would crush you. You might be praying for love, but without the maturity to nurture it, fall apart. Preparation is proof of trust. It's how you demonstrate that you believe the answer is coming. There's also a deeper psychological principle here: action amplifies faith. When you start moving in the direction of your prayer, you generate momentum. You see small progress, you feel capable. And that capability strengthens your trust. It's no longer just an abstract hope, it's a lived experience. You start to feel the edges of your prayer taking shape in reality, and that shapes you in return. But here's the danger. You can also sabotage this process by living as if your prayer will never be answered. This is more common than people realize. They pray for change, but keep all the structures in place that guarantee nothing changes. They pray for freedom, but cling to the habits that keep them bound. This is the equivalent of asking for a harvest while refusing to plant anything. Even if the conditions are perfect, you won't see results because there's nothing growing. The discipline here is to act as if the opportunity you're praying for is already in motion toward you. If you were praying for a job and knew with certainty that the call was coming in 2 weeks, how would you prepare in the meantime? You'd update your resume, sharpen your skills, maybe even start dressing the part. That's trust in action. The same applies to every prayer, live today in alignment with what you're asking for, so that when it arrives, you're not scrambling to become the person who can handle it. There's another reason this matters: alignment accelerates clarity. Sometimes, very act of preparing for your prayer reveals whether it's truly what you want. You might start preparing for a dream and realize it's not your dream after all. It was just a borrowed desire, something you thought you should want. That's not failure, that's refinement. You've saved yourself years of chasing something that doesn't fit, and you've opened the way for a prayer that's truly yours to emerge. This is why ancient wisdom and modern psychology agree on one thing: belief is not enough. It has to be embodied. You can believe in health until it shapes your eating, sleeping, and movement habits. It's just theory. You can believe in abundance until it shapes how you manage and invest your resources. It's just talk. You can believe in love until it shapes how you show up for others. It's just sentiment. Embodied belief, belief expressed through action, is the bridge between prayer and reality. And yes, there's still mystery in how and when your prayers will be answered. You can't control the timing. You can't predict every twist and turn. You can make sure that when the moment comes, you're not found unprepared. That's the difference between those who receive and those who miss their opportunity. The ones who receive were ready before it arrived. They weren't waiting passively, they were living actively in expectation. So if you're praying for something today, ask yourself, does my life look like I believe this will happen? If the answer is no, that's not condemnation. It's an invitation to bring your habits, your choices, your environment, and your mindset into harmony with your prayer. When all of that is aligned, your prayer stops being something you visit occasionally. It becomes the atmosphere you live in. Because ultimately, trusting your prayer is not just about speaking it, it's about becoming it. You become the kind of person who naturally moves toward the thing you're asking for. And when you do, you're not just waiting for the answer, you're walking toward it every single day. So remember this: every choice you make after you pray is either evidence of your trust or evidence of your doubt. Live in such a way that your life itself becomes proof that you believe the answer is on its way. When your actions speak the same language as your prayer, you stop hoping for change and start living in it. And when you live in it, the gap between asking and receiving begins to close. One of the most difficult aspects of trusting your prayers is accepting that the answer may not come in the form you were expecting. or in the timing you were hoping for. It's easy to have faith when life says yes to you. The real test comes when life says, not yet, or not this way. And this is where many people lose trust, not because the prayer went unheard, because the answer didn't match the script they had in mind. We have to be honest here. Most of us are not just asking for an outcome. When we pray, we're also asking for control over how that outcome unfolds. We think we know the best route, the best timing, the best packaging for the answer. And when reality doesn't conform to that image, we assume something went wrong. But sometimes, the delay or the detour is the very thing that makes the answer possible. From a psychological perspective, this has to do with our brain's bias toward immediacy. The human mind is wired to prefer short-term certainty over long-term potential. That's why waiting feels so uncomfortable. It's our survival instincts kicking in, telling us that what's unknown might be unsafe. In the realm of prayer and trust, the willingness to tolerate uncertainty is essential. If you can't stand the not yet, you'll never make it to the now. Philosophically, this is about understanding that your vantage point is limited. You can see only a fragment of the picture. A closed door might protect you from something that would harm you in ways you can't imagine. A delay might be positioning you to meet the right people, develop the right skills, or avoid the wrong path entirely. When you demand an answer on your timeline, you're assuming you see the whole board, but you don't. And that's not a flaw in you, it's simply the reality of being human. This is why some of the most painful seasons in life turn out, in hindsight, to be the most necessary. The job you didn't get freed you for the opportunity that truly fit. The relationship that ended made space for the one that would grow you. The years of apparent silence were the years you developed the resilience to carry what you would later receive. You couldn't see it in the moment, but the not yet was never a no. It was preparation. And let's be clear, this doesn't make waiting easy. Delays test not only your faith, but also your patience, your humility, and your self-control. They expose the parts of you that are still trying to dictate terms to life. They strip away illusions about how much control you actually have. And if you let them, they can teach you a deeper form of trust, one that doesn't depend on immediate gratification, rests on the conviction that even in the absence of visible progress, something is unfolding in your favor. There's also the matter of the not this way answer. This one can be even harder to accept than a delay. Sometimes you get what you prayed for, but it comes through a route you never would have chosen. It's messy. It's inconvenient. It challenges your comfort zone. You wanted growth, but it came through loss. You wanted wisdom, but it came through failure. You wanted strength. It came through struggle. We love the idea of answered prayer. We just don't always love the form it takes. Here's the thing. If the purpose of prayer is not just to get something, but to become someone, the form of the answer matters less than the transformation it produces in you. Not this way. Moments shape you in ways that a perfect, painless yes never could. They stretch your capacity. They break you out of your narrow vision. They reveal possibilities you didn't know existed. From a growth perspective, this is crucial. If every prayer was answered exactly as you imagined, you'd never be challenged to expand your understanding of what's possible. You'd never learn to adapt. You'd never discover the deeper, more creative solutions that life has to offer. And sometimes, the route you resist the most is the one that takes you exactly where you need to be. Of course, this requires humility. It's humbling to admit that you don't always know the best way for your own life to unfold. It's humbling to accept that the plan you built in your head might not be the plan that will serve you best in reality. But humility and trust go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other. In practical terms, learning to accept not yet and not this way means staying open and adaptable. It means refusing to shut down just because the first door didn't open. It means looking for the lesson in the delay, instead of assuming the delay is a punishment. It means trusting that the redirection is not rejection, it's refinement. The truth is, some of the greatest blessings in your life will not come wrapped in the paper you expected. Some will arrive looking like setbacks. Some will come disguised as endings. But if you can hold your trust steady in those moments, you'll eventually see that they were answers in disguise. So if you've prayed and you're in the waiting room, right now, don't waste the time by pacing the floor in frustration. Use it to prepare. Use it to strengthen yourself. Use it to grow into the person who can receive and sustain the answer when it arrives. And if you find yourself on a path you didn't plan for, don't assume it's the wrong one just because it wasn't on your map. Life has a way of leading you through places you'd never choose, only to bring you to places you'd never trade. Because in the end, trust in your prayers is not proven when you get exactly what you asked for, exactly when you wanted it. It's proven when you can look at a closed door or an unexpected turn and still say, "This is part of the answer." It's proven when you can live with peace in the middle of the unknown, because you believe that the unknown is not empty, it's just unseen. So remember this, yes will test your gratitude, not yet will test your trust, and a not this way will test your humility. If you can pass those tests, there is very little in life that will be able to shake you. And when the answer finally comes, whether it looks like what you imagined or not, you'll be ready to receive it with open hands and an open heart. If you've been listening closely, you'll notice there's a thread running through everything I've said so far. It's the idea that trust in your prayers is not a passive, mystical state, it's an active, disciplined way of living. It's not about retreating into blind hope, nor is it about trying to bend the universe to your will. It's about positioning yourself in such a way that you can meet life, whatever it brings, with strength, adaptability, and a deep sense of alignment. And that positioning is not accidental. You don't stumble into trust. You cultivate it. You develop it the way you develop any meaningful skill, through repeated exposure to difficulty, through deliberate practice, through the willingness to keep going even when you feel like nothing's happening. We live in a culture that values immediacy, where everything is measured by speed. We expect overnight results, instant feedback, quick fixes. Trust, real trust, operates on a completely different timeline. It demands that you step outside the rhythm of constant urgency and settle into something deeper, slower, more enduring. And that's uncomfortable, because it means confronting the part of you that wants to control everything now. But here's the truth. If you always demand immediate answers, you will miss the kind of answers that require time to take shape. Some of the most important shifts in your life will happen so gradually that you won't notice them day to day. You'll think nothing is changing, but in reality, you're being prepared, positioned, refined. This is why it's so critical to maintain alignment between your belief and your behavior. Not just when you're excited about the possibility, especially when you're tired of waiting for it. From a psychological perspective, this is about building tolerance for uncertainty. Most people treat uncertainty as a threat, which makes sense from an evolutionary standpoint. Uncertainty in the wild could mean danger. In a growth context, uncertainty is not a threat, it's a space of potential. The problem is that the human nervous system doesn't differentiate between the two unless you train it to. That's what this entire process is, training your mind and body to remain steady in the gap between asking and receiving. Philosophically, you could think of this as the art of cooperation with reality. You bring your will, your vision, your effort to the table, but you also accept that reality has its own order, its own timing, its own way of unfolding. You stop seeing your prayer as a demand you make of life, and you start seeing it as a collaboration with it. This shift removes the resentment that often builds when things don't happen the way you planned. Now, there's a layer of maturity that comes with this. Immature faith treats a delay as proof that nothing is happening. Mature faith understands that a delay often means something better is being constructed behind the scenes. Immature faith panics at the first sign of resistance. Mature faith expects resistance as part of the process. When you operate with that level of maturity, you stop living in emotional extremes. You're no longer elated when something looks promising and crushed when it doesn't. You become steady. And steadiness is one of the strongest indicators of trust. I want to be clear about something. Trusting your prayers doesn't mean you'll never experience doubt. Doubt is inevitable. It's part of being human. The difference is that doubt doesn't control your behavior when your trust is genuine. You don't let it paralyze you. You don't let it pull you out of alignment. You might feel it, but you keep moving forward. That's resilience. And resilience is what turns trust from a nice idea into a lived reality. There's also a practical advantage to this mindset. When you trust the process, when you believe that even the detours and delays are serving a purpose, you become far more adaptable. You can pivot when necessary. You can recognize opportunity in places you never would have looked before. That adaptability is crucial because your prayer might be answered in a form you didn't expect. And if you're too rigid, you'll reject it simply because it doesn't look like what you imagined. This is where so many people get stuck. They pray for change, but only in a form they already understand. They limit the ways the answer can arrive. And in doing so, they close the door to possibilities far greater than their own design. Trust removes those limits. It says, I'm open to the best way, even if it's not my way. That kind of openness not only makes you more likely to recognize your answer when it comes, it also makes you more capable of receiving it fully. And maybe that's the core of all this readiness. The real measure of whether you trust your prayers is whether you're ready for the answer in whatever form it comes. And readiness isn't just about having the skill set or the resources. It's about having the mindset. It's about being humble enough to accept an answer that challenges your plans, patient enough to wait for an answer that takes time, and courageous enough to step into an answer that demands more from you than you thought you could give. So, if you're praying for something right now, ask yourself, am I ready for it to arrive in a way I don't expect? Am I prepared to embrace an answer that requires me to grow before I can hold it? Am I willing to let go of my timeline so that something greater can take shape? Those questions are uncomfortable. They are the very ground where trust is proven. And if your answer to those questions is, not yet, that's fine. That's the work. You build the readiness one choice at a time. You live today in alignment with what you're asking for. You keep showing up, even when nothing seems to be happening. You remain open, even when life closes a door. You hold on to your belief, even when doubt tries to pull it from your hands. Because ultimately, trust in your prayers isn't measured by what you do when everything's going right. It's measured by what you do when nothing seems to be happening. It's measured by your ability to remain steady, prepared, and open, even in the face of uncertainty. That's the kind of trust that doesn't just wait for the answer. It draws it closer. So don't just pray for the answer you want. Live for it, prepare for it, make space for it. And when it arrives, whether it looks exactly as you pictured or comes wrapped in the unexpected, you'll be able to say, I was ready. Because in the end, readiness is trust in action. And the people who are ready never miss what's meant for them.